There, this is Jessica with K&A Greenhouse. This is the new shrubs for 2022 part 2. I have, well, I guess part 3 maybe. I have one on the new hydrangea varieties. I have one with A through M with the Latin names, and this is N through Z. So again, like I said, N through Z is going to be the Latin name, not the common name. So if you're ready to go, let's get started. All right, first up is a new mock orange variety. It is called aureus, which basically means that it has the yellow foliage that you can see here in the photo. The flowers are the same as other mock orange varieties, and just as a note, we will have the green leafed varieties of mock orange this year as well. This is just in addition to what we have had in the past. So it will get the fragrant white flowers that bloom in typically in June. You can see here there's quite a few in the, there's quite a few flowers in the cluster, so you will be able to smell that fragrance from a few feet away. I have some of the green leaf varieties on my property, and probably a good 10 feet away, I'm still able to smell the citrus fragrance to them. Full sun is best for this particular plant. Generally speaking, mock orange prefer full sun just for best flowering, but because this one has the yellow foliage too, you are going to need to put it in more full sun just to get that yellow. If you give it too much shade, it will be kind of like a lime green or even just a green color. So just make sure you give it at least 6 hours of sun every day. Like I said, the flowers bloom in June. They don't really get any berries on them, so you don't need to think about that. But the flowers do attract quite a few pollinators. I know I get a lot of bumblebees and honeybees on my flowers. The butterflies do sort of like these, but I I tend to have a lot of other annuals that they go towards first in the same vicinity. So they may get you might get butterflies if you don't have the plethora of flowers available that I have on my property. Size on this one is 6 to 8 feet tall, 4 to 5 feet wide. Mock orange generally seem to grow in more of a columnar shape, like I just talked about here. But you can prune mock orange. It's just essential that you prune them right after they're done flowering. So don't wait until, September to prune a mock orange, because then you'll be pruning off the flower buds for the following year. So make sure that you prune them if you can prune them right around, July 4th, mid-July, right after they're done, then you'll still get the flower next year. And this one also, hardiness for this particular mock orange is 4 to 8, so should be just fine here in the southern half of Wisconsin. We have a couple of new Potentilla varieties coming this year. This one, Bellissima, is kind of a substitute for Pink Beauty that I was not able to find this season. So this is basically the same plant though, same pink flowers. Looks like they're actually just a shade darker than the Pink Beauty flowers would be. Full sun to part shade for this. Full sun, you'll get more flowers. They are very drought tolerant once they get established, so this is a great plant to, kind of nurse the first 3 to 5 years, and then after that you can almost forget about them. Very low maintenance. They do handle pruning though, and the ones that I had on my property, they were Goldfinger, I believe, before I tore them out and put in a weird pine instead. But when I had them on my property, every like 3 years or so, I would just prune them to about 6 inches above the ground, and then that would rejuvenate them to get, better leafing and better flowering. When they get old, they tend to, I don't know if you've seen the older ones, but sometimes they get really bare towards the bottom and they only leaf out towards the top. So that, the hard pruning every 3 to 5 years will really help rejuvenate it and keep it even a tighter growing habit. The mature size on this one, 2 to 3 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide, and hardiness zone is zones 2 to 6. So we're almost on the southern end of the growing hardiness zone for this one. The flowers do attract butterflies, so you will get pollinators with this one. And like I said, low maintenance, drought tolerant. Sometimes the flowers will rebloom later in the summer, especially if you do just kind of give it a little bit of a haircut after that first flush. You might see a second flush later in the summer again. And this is our second new Potentilla. I have not actually seen this one flower, so I don't know how accurate the photo is. It's coming to us new from Monrovia. So they say that the flower buds are kind of a dusty pink. It opens up to like a really pale butter yellow flower with like that dusty pink on the edge. So I'm curious to see what it's going to do for us here in Wisconsin. Again, it's very hardy, zones 3 to 8, so very hardy for a majority of Wisconsin here. Full sun is best for best flowering, but it will handle partial shade, so at least 4 hours of sun or more every day is just fine. Once it gets established, again, it's very drought tolerant, so this is a great option for you if you kind of want to plant it, and then after a few years you can more or less just let it do its thing without too much effort. And then the size on this one is very similar to most Potentillas. It's going to be 2 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide, so it's not going to take up a lot of space in your landscape at all. A Nanking Cherry is definitely not new on the market, but it is new to us getting it in. I I tried to plant this in my property probably about 5 years ago, and the rabbits thanked me profusely for giving them a nice buffet. So if you do plant this and you have rabbits or even deer on your property that are kind of an issue, make sure that you fence this and or spray it, do something to keep the critters away until it gets big enough. The one that I planted was, I want to say, 2 feet tall, so it didn't take much for the rabbits to just mow it down to nothing, and then the poor plant didn't have any really resources to be able to, releaf again and become a real plant. The Nanking Cherry, you can see here the flowers, they come out in spring, and then you will get actually edible cherry fruit later in the summer. The birds will basically pick the berries off of the tree before anything else will be able to get it. But if you are fortunate enough to find some and get a bunch of berries, they are very tart, so just know that they're not going to be, like a Bing cherry or Rainier cherry flavor. They're a tart cherry, but they're great for making cherry jelly or cherry jam, and you can also use these in pies. So that's a great selling point for this one. Edible fruit on it if you can get your hands on it before the birds do. Hardiness on this is up to a zone 3, so definitely hardy here in Wisconsin. It is a fairly large plant, so just make sure that you give it enough space. It's going to be 6 to 10 feet tall and 10 to 15 feet wide at maturity. So just keep that in mind. It would make a nice, accent plant if you want to put it on the corner of your property. If you want to make a hedge, a very large hedge, you can do that with this plant as well. But again, like I said, just make sure if you have critter problems, you keep them safe, especially when they're younger, from munching critters. And another note, all cherry varieties are hardy underneath walnut trees. They're really not affected by the juglone toxicity, so this would be an option if you have a black walnut or so in your property. Some azaleas this year were harder for me to find. So in the past I've been able to get in white lights, and I was not able to get that variety in this year. This particular variety was recommended to me from a couple of suppliers, so I decided to get this one in kind of as a substitute. 2 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide is the mature size on this one. Blooms in the spring, as you can see, with nice clusters of white flowers, and it will give you some red fall color, orange fall color, depending on how much light it gets. So with it being an azalea, it does prefer more of a full sun location. If you have part sun, that's okay too. I know some of my friends have them underneath some shade trees, so they will get, kind of sun in the morning and then dappled sun for the rest of the day. The azalea seems to do just fine there. Hardiness zone on this one is 5 to 8, so it is on the northern end of its hardiness zone, but this one's been on the market long enough that I trust that being the correct hardiness zone for it. So if you're out in the country, zone 3 or 4, this one wouldn't work for you, but closer in the cities or, southern part of Wisconsin, this particular variety will be just fine for you. And then just as a note, the azalea varieties are not evergreen like rhododendrons are. It's kind of hard. A lot of people get confused with that. Rhododendron is the Latin name of azalea, and rhododendron is the Latin name of rhododendrons. So the azalea versions of them are deciduous. They will change to a fall color and then lose their leaves in the winter, whereas the evergreen rhododendrons will hang on to their leaves all winter long. So this one is one of the deciduous types that will lose its leaves in the winter months. And speaking of evergreen rhododendrons, here is a new variety that we're getting in this year. This one is coming to us from, I believe, Monrovia. Pale pink flowers bloom in spring, and then for the rest of the growing season, it's just the glossy dark green foliage. In fall, you will get a red fall color, and then just know that in the winter, sometimes the leaves turn brown instead of remaining green or red. And that's completely normal. In the spring, they'll green up again, no problem. It doesn't mean that your plant has died. So with it being an evergreen rhododendron, they typically prefer more part sun to full shade. Shadier spots are better for this. They don't like having wet feet, so if you have an area that has standing water, definitely don't put this in there. It'll end up rotting. So hardiness zone on this is 4 to 9, and the mature size is 6 feet by 6 feet, but just know that the evergreen rhododendrons do grow fairly slowly, so don't expect it to get to mature size that quickly. This is a new spirea that I've had a couple people asking for, and I was finally able to snag a few of them from our suppliers out west. The double play blue kazoo. The name on it is not because of the flowers. You can see here it has white clusters of flowers, but the foliage is a really nice mix of kind of yellows, maroons, and then kind of a blue-green foliage that will last all season long. The mature size on this is 2 to 3 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide, so it's a fairly small plant. And as with all spirea, it handles pruning pretty well, so I typically recommend to people too, if they have the time, once it's done flowering in June, early July, if you give it a little bit of a haircut, take those old flower heads off, it may rebloom again for you later in the summer. Generally speaking, the second flowering is not going to be as floriferous as the first one, but it's still nice to get that second flush of blooms. As with all spirea, this one prefers full sun to part shade, so anything 4 hours or more of sun every day is perfectly fine for growing this plant. And then the fall color on this one is kind of, you can almost see in the photo here, kind of a purplish maroon color is also going to be the fall color on it. Bladder Nut is one of them that is also in my Wisconsin native tree and shrub presentations. So if you've seen that, you're familiar with this plant. This is a Wisconsin native plant. Typically, you see it all over Illinois, but it's really only around the river, the river, Mississippi River, Fox River, that kind of thing here in Wisconsin. With that said, if you do have a spot that is standing water or seems to be, wetter than some other areas in your property, this would be a great option for you because it's native to that type of location. So you might as well, put it where it's happiest. The flowers on it, as you can see here in the top photo, they have kind of a dusty pink bud, and then they open to bell-shaped clusters that are white generally in late spring, early summer. And then the photo on the bottom is what their fruit looks like. It's a very papery fruit that kind of forms in late summer, August or so. The preference for light on this one is part sun to full shade. So if you do 4 hours or less of sun a day for this, that is best. It's more of an understory type plant. It doesn't want to be out in the field, in the middle of blazing hot sun. Size on this one is pretty big. It's 8 to 12 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet wide, so you're going to need to give it some space. And I don't really recommend to, prune it to keep it smaller. If you have the space for it, great. And if you don't have space for something this large, we do have other plants that can, grow in wetter sites that are a little bit smaller. This one also hardiness is zone 3 to 8, so it is definitely hardy for a majority of Wisconsin. Donald Wyman Lilac is another one that's also in my lilac presentation. This one is one of the latest blooming lilacs, so if you really like lilac shrubs and you want to kind of prolong the blooming period of them, this and Miss Canada are the two Preston lilacs that typically bloom the latest of the shrub forms. So this one is full sun to part sun. If you can give it 4 hours or more every day, that's great for it. Full sun is going to be best if you want the most flowers though. So if you can give it 6 hours or more, you're going to get the most flowers and therefore the most fragrant blooms on it. Hardiness zone for Preston lilacs is always very hardy. It's zones 2 to 7, so we're kind of in the middle for the hardiness zone on this one. And another reason why this one is nice, the Preston lilacs also leaf out a little bit later. So a lot of the common lilacs, the old-fashioned types that we're so used to seeing, on the farm, on the farm and on, grandma and grandpa's property, those leaf out really early. And then because it's Wisconsin, we always get that late frost in May sometime, and they always nip the lilac leaves. So then they end up, browning out completely and dying off the plant and having to relief, or you'll get the edges that are brown throughout the entire season. So this one's nice just because they do leaf out and flower later in the season. Size on this is 8 to 10 feet tall, 5 to 8 feet wide. So with lilacs, if you do want to prune them, just make sure that you prune it right after it's done flowering. Don't wait until August. You're going to prune off the flower buds for the following season. And this one also, lilacs in general don't like to have wet feet, so if you have a drier spot, the lilacs will do much better in a drier spot than a wet spot. This is also a new lilac variety, which is also in my lilac presentation if you've seen that one. The Madame Lemoine is one of the common lilacs, also known as French lilac to some people. The size on this one is 10 to 12 feet tall, 7 to 10 feet wide, which is pretty standard for this type of lilac shrub. Hardiness zone is 4 to 7, so southern half of Wisconsin should be totally fine to grow this one. And as always, full sun is best for flowering. If you do part sun, you won't get quite as many flowers, but still okay for the lilacs. The site location should be a dry or well-drained site. It does not like to have wet feet like all other lilac varieties. And the flowers in this one also bloom pretty early in spring. The main difference between this one and other whites is the tiny florets are semi-double to double, so it gives the flower a fuller appearance than other white flowering varieties. And the new Arrowwood viburnum that we're getting this year is called Little Joe. Definitely not new on the market. I vaguely recall selling this one about 15 years ago when I was up in Appleton. But this one is nice just because it's a little bit smaller. A lot of the Arrowwood viburnums tend to be, 8 to 10 feet tall. We do have Raspberry Tart, which is a little bit smaller. It's 4 to 6 feet, I believe. Little Joe is 4 by 4. So this is probably the smallest of all of the Arrowwood viburnums that we will have this year. A note with Arrowwood viburnums, if you want this nice blue fruit to show up in late summer, like a lot of people do, you need a different variety in order to pollinate. It will not cross-pollinate if you have a hedge of just Little Joe and that's all. So you do need to have something like Raspberry Tart. We have Blue Muffin, and sometimes we have some like Chicago Luster, things like that. So any other variety of Arrowwood viburnum will pollinate Little Joe, and then you'll get the nice blue berries. If you don't want the blueberries, then you'll just get the white flowers, and then that's it. Fall color on all Arrowwood viburnums are kind of a burgundy red color, so you get that kind of added bonus for you to extend your season in your garden. Hardiness zone on Arrowwood viburnums are 4 to 8, so this one definitely hardy for at least the southern half of Wisconsin here. And moving on to the plant that no one knows how to pronounce. Some people call it Weigela, some people say Weigela, Google thinks it's Weigela. Who knows? If you come out to the garden center and ask for that one plant that starts with W, most of us will know what you're talking about. So the variety on this is Magical Fantasy. We're getting this new from Monrovia this year. You can see in the photo the foliage on it is a nice cream variegation, and the flowers are a mix of kind of a rose pink to a pale pink to white depending on the age. So these bloom typically in June, and then they will rebloom, just not with as many flowers, but they'll rebloom again in August for you. 3 to 4 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide for mature size on this one, and hardy to zone 4. So again, here in Wisconsin, not a problem. Full sun is best for flowering. It will handle partial sun. and the flowers themselves will attract quite a bit of pollinators. I've seen, bumblebee butts hanging out from the flowers on them, and the trumpet shape on them always attracts hummingbirds. Right, another variety called Peach Kisses. Depending on what website you look at, they say it's either going to be pale pink or peach colored flowers. So I'm not sure if that means that they are going to be pink the whole time, or maybe the buds are kind of a peachy color and then they fade to pink with age. I've never had it before, so I'm not sure really what to expect. But I'm hoping it's more of a peach color, just because that would be a little bit different for the Weigelas to have for a flower color. Full sun to part sun is best for all of them. Again, this one's a shorter variety, so it's 2 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. Can fit quite a few places in the landscape with the smaller stature. Hardiness zone is 4 to 8 on this one as well, and as with all of the trumpet-shaped flowers, they will attract the hummingbirds and some of the pollinators as well. And our last new shrub for 2022 is Variegated Dwarf. This one will be coming to us a little bit later, probably when we're already sold out of we have other variegated varieties coming in. This one will be coming in, mid-June or so, so that will hopefully replenish the variegated foliage for us. But this one is pretty similar to some of the other ones. Instead of having the cream colored edge, it has more of a yellow edge. And then you can see the buds on this are a light pink color, and the flowers open up to a very pale pink and then fade to white with age. The mature size on this one is 3 to 4 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide, so it's just slightly bigger than some of the other variegated types. Just to give it a little bit more punch in the landscape. And hardiness on it is a zone 4, full sun to part shade, and as with most of the Weigela varieties, they are drought tolerant once they get established. So if you do have, 3 to 5 years, you're going to need to kind of baby them along, make sure that they get, consistent water just to get the root system established. And once they're established, that you can kind of plant them and just let them be. They do handle pruning fairly well too. So if you wanted to give them more of a structured look versus the wild look that they tend to grow in, that's something that you could do as well. That's all I have for you for all of our new shrubs for 2022. I have other presentations up, lilacs as I talked about. I mentioned the Wisconsin native presentation as well, and we have other new plants like the trees. We have new evergreens up, and I have a new hydrangea separately. So if you have any questions, feel free to email us here at knagreenhouse@gmail.com. If you want to email me personally, just put attention Jessica in the subject line, and I'll make sure to get back to you. You can give us a call at either one of our locations. Typically, once we're open for the season, we're of course there every day, 7 days a week. So if we're not able to answer the phone, we'll get back to you as soon as we can get to the messages. Hope you enjoyed the presentation, and hope to see you in the spring. Thanks so much.